Irashaimase. Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have Graze Counter GM, Bullet Grazing Remastered. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Bikuri Software, Graze Counter GM released for the Nintendo Switch, the PlayStation 4 and 5, the Xbox, and the PC in January of 2023. So this title is a remaster of the original Graze Counter, which released for PC in July of 2017. That title I reviewed shortly after it came out, and I loved the originality and the fun of the main mechanic, the bullet grazing. However, there were a lot of issues with that release that frustrated me, so I was kind of lukewarm on it. So jump to this release, and I can tell you I'm 100% sold on this game. I love it. I spent quite a bit of time with it already, and it's one that, especially if you're a fan of bullet hells, but shoot 'em ups in general, I recommend you check out. And you don't just need to take my word for it. There's a demo available on the Nintendo Switch for this title, and I highly encourage you to give that a try. With that said, let's dive in and see what the game has to offer. So, finding ourselves at the main menu, before we actually start the game, there's quite a bit of gameplay available here. So the value proposition I think is excellent. So in addition to the main game mode, we have this mission mode, which has 30 bite-sized missions along the lines of things like using the graze counter, so kind of like learning the mechanics, grazing all these bullets, surviving for a certain amount of time, as well as like learning how to go in combo and get like high scores within a certain amount of time. So it's really awesome, especially if you like that sort of thing. Archive mode gives you the ability to look through some of the stuff in the game. There's a bit of a character demo. There's a sound test, which is rather nice, as I do enjoy the music for the game. And then in extra mode, we've got some wonderful additions like boss rush and all stages mode, so you can play all the stages together in a nice arcade sense, as well as an extra mode and an unlockable like bonus minigame as well. And with all of that, then we have the main game. Starting the main game, there's actually a couple versions of that as well. There's the standard and the unlimited, which I kind of feels a bit like a Loop 2 sort of experience, where you're going through and the game's just harder with the enemies firing revenge bullets at you. Though in some ways, the revenge bullets are actually beneficial with the main mechanic of the game itself. Starting in standard mode, we're taken to the player select, and initially you would have just two characters available, Uzuki and Satsuki. In the original Graze Counter, there were 8 characters total, so you could unlock the additional 6 characters. However, with GM, they've taken those base 8 characters and they've added 8 more characters. So there's a ton of unlockables here as far as the different characters and ships. And really, it's been a lot of fun unlocking them and trying out the different mechanics that those ships bring to play. So the first 4 ships basically play mostly the same. You've got a different kind of shot, so you've got your narrow spread, your straight shot, your wide spread, and then your powerful straight shot. And the biggest difference between these 4 characters is that you actually have different story depending on which character you select. But the mechanics past that are largely the same. But all the characters past the initial 4, you start to see some really unique changes to the gameplay and the way that the fighters work, so there's that really exciting element. So once you select your player, we're taken to the skill card. So here you can select one of 3 skill cards for the base 4, and then the skill card will be predetermined for any of the fighters past that. So we've got the auto shield, just basically generates a shield around your ship, and if it goes down, it takes 15 seconds to restore. The brake booster, it builds the brake gauge faster, we'll get to that in a moment, and the safety system also, we'll get to this one in a moment, but it lowers the threshold of your safety shield for the Graze Counter itself. So for our purposes today, we'll take the auto shield. Then you have your difficulty selection. There's a total of 4 difficulties you can play in: Novice, Original, Hard, and Extreme. I believe that adds a difficulty over the original game as well. And there is a Pacifist mode as well. Selecting Novice for our purposes today, one thing that does frustrate me ever so slightly is it's not possible to turn off the tutorial for the default characters. That was an option in the original Graze counter, so I'm surprised to see that that was removed. So jumping past the tutorial, which does do a nice job of explaining the mechanics, we find ourselves entering the game itself. It does have a nice 16:9 presentation, so you can see the enemies coming in for the full size of the screen, even though it is but for the most part it actually is a vertical scrolling shoot 'em up, so we're restricted to the boundaries like left and right. Mechanic wise, every ship has their main shot, and then we have the 2 meters that you can see at the bottom. So the one on the left is our Graze counter, and that's the main mechanic of the game, and the one on the right is our break gauge. So how does the Graze counter work? Well, by grazing bullets, we're basically siphoning power from them, and you can tell if you've grazed them correctly as those bullets will turn red. That will fill the Graze counter gauge. Once that gauge is past 50%, you can fire off your Graze counter, or simply just counter if you prefer to be a little bit simpler with it, and that fires a powerful beam forward that has a couple effects. So first off, if your Graze counter is, if the gauge is high enough, you'll have a shield that will activate around your ship momentarily, protecting you from enemy shots. The other ability that it has is the beam itself will cancel out enemy bullets. So it's a great defensive counter, as it were, being really appropriate to the title. And the last ability it has is it generates star items. Those star items fill the break gauge in the bottom right. So what does the break gauge do? Activating the break gauge activates basically a super powered mode where we'll be firing some really large shots quite rapidly that generate tons of star items. So it's a really great way to go and build your score. And there's some other mechanics that I'll get to in just a moment. This is the first boss, and especially on like a novice, it's very easy to go and take this boss fight down. That clears the stage. We're given bonuses for the number of stars we collected in the stage, as well as our number of lives, and then we can move on to the next stage. Now here's one area where the game does start to diverge quite a bit from the original in terms of stages. So in stages 2 and in stages 4, instead of just playing through linearly with one stage, we have a route select available: Aqua Illusion and Crystal Labyrinth. So in the original, Crystal Labyrinth would be your second stage, so we're going to take Aqua Illusion as our second stage. So that's what the all stages mode is you would actually be playing through both of the stages in one playthrough. But it is neat that there is a little bit of branching path throughout the course of the game. Unfortunately, it's not quite as wide as, say, something like a Darius title. You go to your second choices, then you go back to the same stage 3, then you have the choice again, and then you're back to the same stage 5. And there's a total of 5 stages in the game, but they do have some decent length, and just the way that the mechanics work are really fun. So now, one of the things that I definitely love about good shoot 'em up, and bullet hells in particular, is that their scoring is like a lot of the fun of the gameplay, and Graze Counter GM is no exception. So when we're grazing, not only are we filling up the meter for our Graze counter, but we're also filling up our multiplier meter, which is in the top right. So as your Graze bullets, you're increasing your modifier, and that goes all the way up to times 1000. So the point values get very, very large in this game very quickly. And another benefit of being in break mode is that meter, the rate of decay is significantly reduced. So you would kind of want to go through if you're looking for high scores, go through the loop of building up the meter as high as possible, as well as your break gauge using the Graze counter system. Then keep the meter as high as possible in points where you can get a lot of points from numerous enemies using your break mode from the break gauge. And that's basically what we have here gameplay wise for Graze Counter GM. So the system itself, I just feels like is just so solid and fun to play. Oh yeah, there is also focus movement as well, which I feel like most ships actually have pretty decent movement speed, so it's not as necessary as a lot of bullet hells. But sometimes, especially where the mechanic is that we're trying to get up close and personal with like the bullets, you will need to be careful with that. So that's basically Graze Counter GM served up for your enjoyment. As far as some of the minus flavors are concerned, these ones are relatively minor. So some of the complaints that I had, on the PC one, were that its UI and the game launcher in particular made it difficult to play and use. Especially on a console like the Switch, those problems are gone. You can just go and load it up and it runs beautifully. There were also some performance issues for the original as well. So some of my original complaints are no longer there. The story was also kind of hard to follow, but the translation is better for this version, and it just is overall better written as well. But what the kind of like issues do I have with it? So there is no online leaderboard, and at present there's actually a glitch with the even your like local leaderboard as well. So the no online leaderboard is disappointing, as I feel like the mechanics for this game would like definitely lend themselves really well to competing against other players for leaderboard position. But even on your local leaderboard, the glitch that I was like talking about, it's only saving the first 2 times you finish the game. Anything past that is just getting lost to the ether, which is disappointing to say the least. Then there's that minor complaint that I had that it's not possible to turn off the tutorials for the base characters, even though you could in the original version of Graze Counter. But as far as the plus flavors are concerned, I just love the main mechanic of the game itself. The whole bullet grazing / enemy grazing to power up the counter, and then using that, it just creates a really fun, satisfying loop that I feel like few bullet hells can really compete with. Then you have all the unlocks for the characters, so having a total of 14 different characters / ships that you can unlock is incredible, and it's great to go and like just try them out and see how they've like changed up the gameplay. It's very, very satisfying to unlock another characters, try them, and be like, wow, this is actually a really fun way to play the game. And then I also really like a lot of the presentation here. So like the art is like, the game's always had decent mech design, but the art is better in this release. Everything is just like cleaner from the sprite wise, so you can better see that the mech designs are like, well, really it's a kind of like Starfighter design that I really enjoy. So there's a lot here that I just really had a lot of fun with, and this is definitely a solid recommend from the chef. So highly encourage you to go and check this one out. Remember, there is a demo on the Nintendo Switch version, so you can check it out that way. And with that said, thank you so much for joining me this week for Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I hope you have a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Shmups never die.